And Madam holds a postgraduate degree in human resources from Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Pune. And she lives in Mumbai and is married to a fellow banker and has a 26-year-old daughter who has a who is a qualified architect. She enjoys reading, cooking, and is a movie buff. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you. Good
Thirdly,
evening, everyone. Good to be here. Sorry,
we
please go ahead.
have
Yeah, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thirdly, we have Mrs. Pearl R. Vargas. She is the Chief General Manager, Head of Human Resource Development and Staff Learning College of Saraswat Cooperative Bank. She joined the bank in November 1985 as a stenographer and rose through various cadres. And presently, she is the Chief General Manager heading the the Human Resource Department. Since last 4 years completed 36 years and 8 months in the bank, a long period with an organization. And she is heading the HR department with a staff strength of around 4,200 employees in the bank. Having all round experience from branch banking operations, including managership, credit processing to HR department. We welcome all our panelists and the moderator for our panel discussion for this panel session will be done by our CEO, Mr. Biswaketan Das. Now I like to set the stage for this panel discussion and request our CEO to please take it over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Priti.
Good evening, everyone.
Good afternoon to all of the panel members. Actually, we are privileged to have a distinguished panel like you. And it shows the power of women also in the banking industry. So, and with some diverse fields, diverse qualification, so converging into HR. The pandemic has actually disrupted the entire functioning of the banking. More so, it has affected at all levels, at the branch level, at the most also. And in spite of that, the learning department, if you say, or the HR department per se, which is used interchangeably, is always at the line of fire for doing something or for not doing something. So here, if you say the transforming HR in the digital world, as I was discussing the EASE 4.0, which has been unveiled by the Honorable Finance Minister and which has a clear categorical thrust on digital banking going forward. How do we do that? Because the profile are different in private sector banks, the profiles are different in PSUs, the profiles are different in urban cooperative banks. So we have created the panel having Ms. Lakshmi from State Bank, and mostly it represents the PSUs. Ms. Archana, one of the finest and biggest private sector banks, which has shown the way to the banking industry. And of course, Ms. Paul Bhagis, one of the robust, solid urban cooperative banks. So three of you are here. Welcome here. Before I proceed with some of the questions from our side and some questions from the participants, I would request to speak maybe for 1 or 2 minutes or few minutes on the subject, transforming HR in the digital world. What is your take on this? We may start with Lakshmi.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Das. Thank you for having me on the panel. I'm actually glad to be here. Well, something that is close to my heart is, the concept of digital leaders. When you say in the digital world, we are moving towards everything virtual, perhaps a lot of things will be different, but a lot of things will remain the same too. So the digital leadership, whether it is by the banks, in the digital world, everything that you need to do, you do it online. You have only limited human interface. Will it work going forward? Because man is a social animal. And will we actually come back to a certain kind of balance between the digital and the human, between the digital and the physical. Already, we had work from home during the pandemic. At least on alternate days, most of the public sector banks had this. Uh, but what happened is that after a certain point, I think everybody wanted to get back to the office. Yes, a few want to continue with some of the flexible working, working atmosphere, working environment. They would like to continue with that, but mostly it's all about, when it comes to HR, it's all about flexibility. And can we find a balance between the digital, where it is, a faceless kind of a platform, and the other side, where you have physical interactions in a branch or in any other office. So we need to find that balance. Can we find that balance?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, Ms. Rachana, your view?
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. My apologies. At a very inopportune moment, my neighbor has decided to do some drilling. So if there is some background noise, I please forgive me for that. Are you getting a noise, sir? Can I check?
No, we are not.
Somewhere?
We are able to hear you clearly. Don't worry.
Perfect, great. Thank you so much. So just taking on, and yes, good to be part of such a distinguished panel, but just taking on from, what Lakshmi was just talking about, I think she's absolutely right. And, from an HR perspective, I think before we, talk what she was mentioning, right, what she's talking about, which is really, bridging the gap, technology, bridging the gap between the physical and the digital or phygital, as some people call it. I think that's going to be very important. While brick and mortar, from a branch banking perspective, all of us know that's important. I don't think that's going to go away in a hurry. But we've all seen that a lot of myths around digital itself have disappeared because of the pandemic, right? Because the situation sort of forced us to go there, right? And what are some of these myths? And we've seen this in the past when computerization happened, right? So one of the myths is that digital transformation means that there will be a reduction of human force, right? Now we all know nothing is farther from the truth, right? And we've seen that happen time and again. New roles, new jobs get created. The other myth, I think, which is important, that people keep saying that financial institutions don't adopt technology fast enough because of security concerns. And we all know nothing can be farther from the truth. Banks actually have taken and other financial institutions have taken a forefront in this. Today, you have online banks, the new banks that are coming up. So I think these are some of the things that have myths that have got completely debunked. One more thing that I'd like to add is that what this pandemic has proven is that geography has become history, right? There are many, many roles where we have realized now, and we were forced to realize it, where it is possible to work from home or in a hybrid or a remote working environment. Of course, I recognize that there are some branches in roles in branches where this will not be possible to do. But I think the mindset of HR, the mindset of leaders, the mindset of supervisors to start thinking differently because of the digital capabilities, and people are able to work effectively, right, without necessarily being in a physical location. So I think it's up to us. We have to first get our heads around it. Pandemic has certainly pushed us all in that direction, whether we liked it or not. And how do we sort of, bridge that balance is something that I think, HR leaders definitely need to focus on and work with management teams to be able to really take advantage, I would say, of this, this wave, if I can call it that. Yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Nice. Yes, Ms. Burgess.
Yes, sir, I lost it between because of some interruption. I have to speak on that question, is it?
No, you just your view on this transforming HR in the digital world. Overall view. How do you see going forward?
So as my colleagues also on the dais spoke, I am also of the view, sir, that it is going going to be very different, sir, because of this digital. We have been able to do a lot of things. Our customers, ours being a cooperative bank, through these digital channels, we have been able to give good customer service, and even in training, because of this virtual mode, we are able to cater to the trainings also. So it's a good thing, sir, I believe.
Yeah, thank you.
Positive, yeah.
Yeah, Lakshmi, just tell me, this pandemic has brought home the fact that the overall well-being of the employees is quite important because it has disrupted not only the official life, their personal life also. Okay, so how do you see that the employee well-being will be a part of HR policy so that the productivity improves?
Well, I believe actually there cannot be a singular answer to employee centricity, the emotional well-being. It's all, a combination of managing stress, emotional well-being, even flexible workplaces. Let me share a conversation I had with a colleague during my stint in HR in a circle network. He came to me with a request for a transfer to a certain place. He knew his request was not justifiable, but he came anyways. For about 15 minutes or so, he narrated his story, at the end of which I had to tell him why I had to decline his request. Well, he just said, "Thank you for listening to me, being courteous, even though you couldn't help me." Well, I never forgot that lesson. So, organizations cannot be immune to individual employee stress. This manifests in different ways with the organization, in customer behavior, in peer behavior, or in hierarchical behavior. It is important that we actually encourage stress management actively. Individually, people may resort to many activities to relieve stress, say yoga, exercise, pursuing hobbies. Within large organizations, also, some of these activities are undertaken in silos, say in branches or offices. These cannot always be top driven. In as much as there's a large element of heterogeneity among the staff. So the individual siloed initiatives could continue, but at the corporate level, the professionalism in approach at all levels can be an important stress buster. More than relieving stress, it plays an important role in not creating stress. What behavior do we expect from our frontline staff with the customer? We expect a certain behavior. Can we not practice the same while we are interacting with our colleagues and subordinates? Well, deliberate calm and bounded optimism are trending today. We need to nurture these qualities among the leaders as well as among the employees. A kind ear does more to relieve stress. Maybe we are not able to provide solutions, we are not able to please all, but what prevents us from listening to people? For an individual, support systems are available in the form of family, friends in society, peers and bosses in the office. And if we are to analyze the time spent, we would notice that office work occupies much of the time spent by an individual during the day. It is important that organizational support systems are available at individual and group levels. If you ask most people their reasons for stress, I'm sure a whopping percentage would attribute it to work-related stress. So can we have an organization which can move towards achieving business goals without creating stress? Because after all, why does one work? To be able to meet one's physiological and psychological needs. If my work only enables the physiological needs, is it worthwhile? Emotional well-being is an extension of relieving stress and providing more of psychological necessities to a human being. Well, if we are to look at the first such examples of any organization practicing employee emotional well-being, the Tatas come to mind and their concept of townships. The concept of a township envisages that employees, their families have access to, say, a common theater, common sports facilities, school, others. For large organizations, say like SBI, it is a tad difficult. But the point I'm trying to make is organizational emotional well-being of an individual is important and is directly linked to employee productivity. Work-life balance, the outcome of initiatives like I mentioned is critical for employee well-being. Within SBI, we take steps like providing holiday homes, hospital tie-ups, student scholarships. In fact, we now have employee helpline called Sanjeevni, where employees can interact and get help from mental health experts too. Many private companies have something called the annual sports day. Can we have such quarterly happiness creators like, annual days. The pandemic has also proved that work from home is not a myth. Organizations across the spectrum actually have enabled this. But flexibility in workplace is something which can be associated to individual organizations, the type of work they're doing. In service organizations like ours, like banks, it is difficult to practice. The benefit of such an exercise may not accrue to people across the organization. But well, at unit level, other enablers can also be put in place, like, helplines about creches, kids' rooms, etc. Maybe in a few places, the lunchroom is now going online. Along with flexibility in the workplace, flexibility in time can also be explored. Maybe work has to be divided into neatly identifiable tasks so that monitoring becomes easy. To me, workplace flexibility in time and place cannot be the norm, but can be provided as a facility at individual levels. Because as I said earlier, human beings are social animals. And human productivity is also linked to discussions, interactions with peers and superiors, subordinates. Webinars may facilitate this, but the personal touch may be missing. So basically, workplace flexibility should be used as a means to relieve stress and provide emotional well-being. I would like to just end by saying that an organization is not a building or branches or a virtual network. It is made up of people like us. Indian philosophy says what you give will come back to you manifold. So the comfort and care that organizations lavish on their employees will surely come back as better performance and contribution to the organization. So all three things together, you said employee well-being, it actually means better stress management, emotional well-being, and flexible workplaces at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So nicely put. Actually, you have to give a conducive environment to the employees. And rightly said, there is a saying that I am because you are. So that is the empathy we have to show. I would come to Ms. Archana. You see, the pandemic has dramatically changed the work environment, right? So now what has happened after 1.5 years, there is a study which shows employees are beginning to resent the grind of office life. Right? They are happy by doing work from home, work from cafe, work from somewhere in Panvel or some Goa. Right? So do you think that this hybrid office model of work is ideal for banking sector, or whether this remote work can become a norm and it will be effective?
Sorry, I was just unmuting myself. Yes, absolutely. I think it's a question we've asked ourselves often during the pandemic, and I think the answer is yes and no. I think there are, like I mentioned earlier, roles where it may not be possible to do hybrid working, right? And so therefore, is the model workable? The answer to that is definitely a yes. So I think there are a couple of things that any organization that is looking to do either a remote or a hybrid working model needs to look at. First and foremost, I think identifying the roles, right? What are the roles that lend themselves to such a hybrid working? What is it that as an organization you want to achieve, right? Because cities like Mumbai, there's a lot of travel. So would you like to look at, hot desking? Would you like to have offices closer to where people live? So it's not necessary that, I have to travel all the way to head office, which is, maybe 25 kilometers away and takes me an hour and a half to actually get there one way, right? So this achieves two purposes. From an employee perspective, I can be closer home, right, while working even out of a physical space. And the second perspective from an organization perspective is that you can save on high cost premises, right? Challenge, of course, here is hot desking, so that, when I want to be in office, or when my colleague and me both want to be in office, will we actually get space, right? So that is one aspect. The other one is adopting technology and tools, right? And I spoke earlier about managerial mindset. There is certain mindset that, unless I have my team sitting physically around me and I'm directing people, I cannot be an effective manager. So can that get replaced with an outcome-based approach, right? Rather than, just saying, I want to be close to the teams that I work with, right? So how can, as managers, we move to outcomes? And as HR, how can we help managers with things like productivity tools, etc.? Right? Because there could be employees, where there could be slack, right? I get that. A lot of them will actually do what they need to do, but there could be some when you don't have a physical control, you might want to be able to do that in a tech way, right? So how do we look at productivity tools? How do we look at technology, right from signing in, in the morning when I'm working from home to my boss knowing exactly how I'm spending the entire day, what progress I'm making in terms of my deliverables, which is really the outcome-based approach. And last but not the least, I think the whole I think mindset, right from senior management. For example, with us, I can give you some examples of HDFC Bank. What we did, somewhere once the second sort of wave had passed, we had been working before that with teams internally. In fact, we have a committee that is actually looking at this. So we looked at all of the aspects, right, that we will require, and this is a 1.5 year plan that we've now undertaken. We've actually identified 3 phases. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is the easy to convert to, work from home and remote working. So they are already working from home. We've already put some of the productivity tools in place. Phase 2 will be looking at another whole set of functions moving on to a remote working. And we expect that at the end of 1.5 years, we'll almost have about 30 to 40% of our people, being in a remote hybrid working. So I think it's the pandemic forced us into it, but now in a planned, systematic way. I think if organizations decide that this is important for them and what are they looking at achieving through this, it can certainly happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is so nice.
I also
So
think
nice.
if I can just add one more point, sorry, I
Yeah,
wanted
please.
to add that. It is also opening up new avenues. So, earlier talent pools that were not, for example, women who want to get into second careers, right? They were not easily, able to do the kind of work schedules physically at work, right? So the talent pool from where we can actually recruit is also expanding if you think differently. So, for example, we hear a lot about the gig economy. Now, what is that? That is people who want to work, short term, people who have specialists. So, all of these talent pools can also be, if we have a remote working or a hybrid working, suddenly you realize that there's a whole lot of people out there who earlier you didn't look at, from a hiring perspective that you can now look at. So, I think there are some imminent advantages of doing this, and we are certainly well down that path, I can say. So, I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah, is answered question very well. Actually, the here what we understand from your thing is that it should be the this output based approach. So how do you see that the outcome? What is the outcome? And then the onus will be on the HR department again to create a tool for performance management system that has to be also developed. And rightly you said, certainly it will help the women who are talented, but because of certain issues they are not able to work. The whole untapped talent pool can be tapped. Thank you. The question for Mrs. Bhagis. The other day when we were designing our HR course, okay, so our director academics had a discussion with one of the faculties from IIM Kojiko, right? What she was telling, she was little surprised that we are trying to have a HR course virtually. So you thought, how it is possible? So as because you are closely associated with learning, it is also a question from IIBF side to you. Whether this virtual mode of training, though it is now widely accepted because of its the ease of joining the courses or anywhere, whether it can replace the classroom training.
Sir, certainly what has happened is during this prevailing COVID-19 pandemic situation and the advent of technology into learning space has emerged as an alternative to physical training by virtual training. During lockdown, WebEx and Zoom platforms for training not only helped to keep abreast of the developments, but also helped employees to stay connected to each other and remain motivated. Virtual trainings make geographical boundaries irrelevant since learning is made available and accessible in easy and flexible manner at cost-effective price. It enables shorter teaching span solutions and works well for basic topics or behavioral trainings and not for the skill level training. Physical training continues to be effective in case of advanced learning topics requiring greater span of concentration, personalized attention, structured and focused training. It also enables greater networking and social bonding skills. In Saraswat Bank, we have a mix of both virtual and physical training for our newly recruited junior officers which we had recently. And in our view, a blended pattern works best. The initial, that is the base topics, can be covered on virtual mode and the follow-up topics can be on physical mode. Each mode has its own merits and demerits, but virtual learning is the new normal mode of learning and needs to be widely implemented for greater reach of learning. This is my view, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Rightly said. It going forward, it may be digital, as Ms. Archana was telling earlier. So that is how this AMP program, what we have designed. This time we have got around 88 candidates from across India, from various banks. So what we have tried to do, we have included immersion programs. Immersion programs at IIM Kolkata, immersion programs at IIBF also. Depending upon the thing, like the courses which cannot be taught, conflict management, team building, that can happen either in the campus of IIM Kolkata or IIBF. Thank you. Thank you. And one more question to Ms. Lakshmi. There is a much debated subject actually from when we joined, and who knows better than you, whether the bank should have specialists or the bank should have generalists. So when we are moving for this job family concept, we are entering a new phase in banking, right? So in this era, this HR will play a vital role in anticipating the need and preparing the employees for the new job roles. And the talent management will be the key. So what is your view? Whether the bank should recruit or prepare specialists, or the generalists are better placed, because generalists will have an overall view.
Yes, actually, in India, we seem to start young when choosing a domain or a profession. I'll just remind you that, I mean, you're aware of this. At the time of Annaprasan of a child at 6 months, in several parts of the country, various objects like a stethoscope, a book, a pen, money, musical instrument, a pair of scissors, laptop, etc. are placed in front of the child. Whichever object the child picks up first is deemed to be his choice of profession. That is how specialization is to us. So specialization versus doing it all has been debated for a very long time now. It is actually still evolving. I'm not sure that I should. Basically, anthropologists say humans are natural generalists. So imagine this kid who starts trying every sport: skiing, wrestling, swimming, skateboarding, basketball, handball, table tennis, soccer, and tennis. You may have guessed who the kid is. It's Roger Federer. He attributes his spectacular success or specialization in tennis to actually playing all these sports. He says it built his athleticism and hand-eye coordination. And if you notice, you look at economics, behavioral economics was formed at the intersection of psychology and economics. Branch heads in many banks need to wear many hats as business drivers, loan appraisal experts, HR experts to manage staff, technology experts for popularizing technology-forward interventions, legals for recovery processes, etc. There are banks who have chosen to specialize and focus their resources in various domains, and but many have been successful in many domains. But then the bank's superior performance is due to their deep understanding of customers and opportunities. So specialization has now become necessary due to various emerging challenges of market competition, digitalization, increasing functions. Banks were accepting deposits. Now they are cross-selling, managing wealth, projects, etc. All these elements require a large element of specialization to respond to customer needs more effectively. But can specialization happen without generalization? My answer would be no. Because unless every employee is exposed to the organizational engine room, that is the frontline operations, the specialization would be meaningless. Specialization would prompt me, as a specialist, to make unreasonable demands on frontline because I'm not aware of the pressure and circumstances. So I think that the first 2 stints for any employee has to be in the front line, say branch, or a centralized processing cell, etc. for all the employees, whether it's the clerical staff or the officers. Then, of course, as you said, the concept of the job family. The choice can be made by the employees, along with, of course, we look at the individual abilities, education qualifications, learnings during the last few years. That can be the basis for one's posting in a specialized area. The officer or the employee can have an extended stint of, say, about 8 years there, by which time one would have reached a senior administrative position. This will help group the second line of leadership in all areas. Decision making requires the leader to create coherence out of a diverse array of resources. They have to connect the dots, and this is possible only if the decision maker has experience of related areas, many areas, complementary skills and behavior, versatility of work experiences, etc. And I would say the adage, jack of all trades, master of none. I would amend it to say jack of all trades and master of at least one or two. So that's my view on specialization. Now, coming to skill upgradation or preparing employees for new job roles. Yes, responsibility of HR or the training vertical. In SBI, we have a separate training vertical to cater better to training needs of the large employee base. Ideally, again, learning must be voluntary, but that is a challenge across the world. To fulfill regulatory requirements and bridge the skill gaps, we need to bring in that element of compulsion. Of course, as you mentioned during the HR conference a few years ago, RBI mandated certifications for certain specialized roles. Mandatory annual training and employee role-based certification programs have now become the norm, at least in SBI, and I think in most of the banks. Virtual training, as you just mentioned, both in self-learning mode and through interactive web series has become popular. It will continue. The reach and connecting power of a webinar, of a virtual session, is unprecedented. Now, as a continuation of virtual learning, again, organizations will need to give micro-knowledge capsules to employees to make them learn on the go. Gamification, SOP help on demand, geofencing, etc. will help, because in these times, when time and attention spans are limited, something like this perhaps would work. Again, when you're talking of preparing employees for new job roles, the role of HR goes beyond that. It has become complex because, yes, the pandemic has accelerated the rewiring of processes, reduced the skill shelf life, changed the worker demographic and expectations. And now, as you said, Mr. Das, that it also means finding new ways for assessing productivity in a new hybrid world. Now, virtual mentorship, building mental resilience, that's really important, because studies say instances of burnout and depression have been the maximum amongst millennials, and millennials are what we are getting now. They will be the future of banking, future of everything, actually. Now, again, an automated career development system is a way of assigning stretch goals to employees, a credible data-backed performance evaluation process, which ensures accountability and performance visibility and alignment between individual and organizational goals. As far as leadership is concerned, I believe it must begin much before the executive reaches the C-suite. Grooming of officers must start at the initial stages. I would look at 3 kinds of leadership: operational leadership, business leadership, and strategic leadership at 3 stages of a banking career, say at the junior, senior, and top management levels. Again, for cross-functional readiness and leading effectiveness of senior leadership, development of attributes such as strategic orientation, drive for results, effective communication, future-ready enablers like digital dexterity, cognitive flexibility, that would help. The other thing which is important for grooming leadership is succession planning. Many organizations plan early for this. CEOs of several organizations in recent times, you may have read the newspapers, they've initiated a search for their successor soon after they themselves became CEOs. And as I mentioned first, the word digital leaders, that is trending. Management gurus believe that visualization, data-based analysis, creative problem solving, big picture thinking, emotional agility, curiosity, and courage are leadership requirements of the future. There is something called leadership obsolescence also, and from time to time, skills need to be renewed. Therefore, leadership training at all three levels of any career, including a banking career, is most essential. I would like to stop here. I think I've taken up a lot of time. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Lakshmi. Very lucidly elaborated, actually. But the thing what I liked is jack of all trades, but become a master of at least one or two. I think that is the takeaway from that. And of course, the creating a robust leadership pipeline. Coming to Ms. Sasana, you see, in HR is also mandated to create individual development paths for officers and define the linkages. If you see the banks, even in PSU banks also, the attrition rate has gone up. Whether it is because of the work pressure, pandemic, branch network, that is another matter. But how do the banks facilitate this internal talent and attract this? Whether the analytics and AI will have a role to play here?
Yeah, so that's a whole lot of questions. Let me try and answer them one by one. So on the first one, I think flexible, nimble organization and competition. I think we spoke about some of this. Definitely, the millennials, right, are going to be managed very differently from how we've been traditionally managing. So I think the whole anywhere remote working is very, very important. Organizations that want to attract different types of talent will have to look at that. Your whole IT network, security systems, right? Because at the end of the day, we have data for customers, and we are caretakers of that data. So to be able to do some of these things, to be nimble, to be able to be out there, I think it's important to have a very, very robust foundation of your entire IT network security, because that's one thing that we definitely cannot compromise on. The other thing is, I think, new ways to attract talent, new talent pools. I spoke about this a little earlier. See, in traditional ways, right? What do we do? Whenever we have a vacancy, we look outside, we try and, get the best fit, usually poach from, competition. But I think to take a step back and, yes, the buy strategy, as I like to call it, we've all been doing that, hiring from one another, but a build strategy, right? And what do I mean by a build strategy is how do you, so for example, in HDFC Bank, we've created a program called Future Banker. Right? So who's a future banker? So we hire a fresher. We put him through a rigorous program of 6 months, including with a mock branch and all of that. We have a partner with whom we do this. And 6 months as an intern in the organization. So this person has spent 1 year understanding banking, going through what it means to do a role in a branch, and only then gets on to a full-fledged role. Now, what we've actually done is we have about 5,000, that's the plan, people who are going to come in through the build model. Traditionally, we would have gone outside and hired for all of these 5,000 people, right? So that's something that we're looking at, so that this also helps us, deal with attrition, right? Because we have a steady supply from the build side coming in, and attrition is a order of the day, no matter how hard we try. Of course, the pandemic has helped bring the numbers down, but I think we can thank the pandemic for that. I don't think organizations have done much to hold on to people. The talent war, I think, continues, and now that the economy is looking up in the last couple of months, I think, like the introduction said, I manage talent acquisition also. We have really seen green shoots. We see companies, non-banks hiring bankers. So that space is, definitely going to continue to remain very, very competitive. The other thing is, I think, work-life balance. I know Lakshmi spoke about, well-being earlier on. But I think overall work-life balance, bringing, that sensitivity, because I think, and I can tell you, HDFC Bank, we're very focused on numbers, very focused on execution, right? So while that's important, how do we create sensitivity? We have launched something called Nurture, Care, Collaborate. About 12,500 line managers, supervisors are going through a 90-day program. And that's really what it is, NCC, right? So Nurture, Care, Collaborate. How do you, actually care for your people? Because that's going to be important, right? You can get delivery, you can get people to perform, but do you at the end of the day, and that also will lead to retention, right? So this is, a recent program. 12,500 managers are also going through a certification that we have planned. So these are some of the things. And as far as I think, mobility is concerned, internal talent mobility, I think it's a vast subject. I would say that first important thing is inclusion, right? That's important because, going back to what Lakshmi was saying on specialization versus, being a generalist, right? I think we have also created where I think the pitfalls of specialization is that you create silos, right? And when you create silos, it is extremely difficult for movement to happen. Talent hoarding happens, right? Because managers don't want to let go of the best people, right? So all of those things. So how do we create an organization, first of all, which is inclusive, where you make everyone feel valued? You know that, here is an organization where I can build my career. Some of the other things that we have seen work, and in fact, we're working on a large project, is a career lattice. I think in banking, I've been in banking for about 25 years. Growth is seen as vertical, right? So within my function, when do I move to the next role? When do I get my next promotion? Those are the questions you will see. No one's really asking at the next role, am I doing more of the same? Can I, rather than move vertically, maybe move parallelly, right? And then I can move vertically. So can there be horizontal movements, right? Is the career lattice actually doable, right? And how can we encourage that? So we are working on a large scale project where we've taken 20% roles that add to 80% of our, mobility and hiring, to showcase to people that if you're in a role in branch banking or in, asset sales or in, for that matter, operations, besides your movements within your function, what are some of the career options that you'll have outside your specialization or your function, and what is the minimum entry criteria? So how do you need to equip yourself, and then tying that up with learning, interventions, right? So if I can skill gap, this is what I need to do. I want to move from, let's say being an RM to a retail asset sales manager. What are some of the things in terms of learning that I need to do? What are the skills that I need to pick up? And can we have programs that will allow people to do so? So career lattice and movements internally, I think, is very important. The other thing I think we have been very, very, seriously discussing, and we've also put in place a program. While past performance is a good indicator of future success, potential is something that, we have not I would say in a standardized fashion. So if you ask any manager, of course, they'll be able to tell you that I think, this is my, key performer. This is the person that I know will go a long way. He or she has a good future. So intuitively, managers know that, these are my top potential employees. But do we have a standardized mechanism? And that is something that we are working on. In fact, we're also implemented development centers, right, to be able to see, based, of course, on a competency framework that's common for the organization. So how do I determine potential, right? And I can also say that what the public sector banks have done very well, which is mobility, geographical mobility. Unfortunately, the private sector banks, at least I can speak for HDFC Bank, we've not done such a good job of that, right? And as you move up the hierarchy, it is important to also have experience of different, Lakshmi talked about functions, being a generalist before you can become a specialist, but also of geographies, right? Deep geos have a very different challenge from metros. The north of India and the south of India will have very different challenges. So if as a manager, you've not had experience in at least 2 or 3 large geographies, you're really not preparing yourself for a leadership role, right? So the mobility is another vector besides potential that we're looking at. And of course, cross-functional exposure. Now that's easier said than done, right? So that's another area where we're looking at how do we, cross-pollinate talent. We have at the very senior levels conducted what we call talent review councils, where our senior managers talk about talent, talk about career aspirations, talk about what these people would like to see themselves doing, and we are actually mapping such movements. And again, I think Lakshmi talked about succession, right? So who are the named successors, how are we investing in them? And there could be people, for example, I have a very senior person in branch banking who's been in branch banking for last 15 years, but before that has experience in credit, and has actually said, I'd like to see myself going back to the credit function. Now, I have this information, but when a vacancy in credit comes up, am I really actually be able to make that movement happen, right? So, a underlying talent framework, right? All of these things that I've spoken about come together in a talent framework that help with mobility. So, I don't know whether I've been able to answer that. It's a little long answer. I'm sorry about
Right.
that.
Right, but
I think
but
Lakshmi
quite
has
enlightening.
sent a message. So
Hearing
we should
from
close
hearing
it.
from the largest private sector bank in regard to identifying the competencies, conduct competency assessment at different levels for developing a succession plan is quite enlightening. You talked of the future bankers, creating future bankers. But what at IIBF we try to do is try to take the employees and create them as future ready by increasing the competency. Thank you. And yeah, Lakshmi, you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something here.
Right.
We have recently started, we have assessment centers, and then we have individual development plans for the senior leaders. And it's a development journey, as I mentioned, on all those competencies like drive for results and collaborative partnerships, strategic orientation, etc., digital dexterity. So we do have that already in place, and it seems to be it's being appreciated. I think
Yeah, I think State Bank is way ahead of these assessment centers. But the only problem with assessment center is what Ms. Archana was also saying. How do we assess the potential vis-a-vis the past performance? Mostly we go by the past performance, but the assessment center is designed to assess the potential. If we are able to do that, absolutely good. I know the State Bank is much ahead of that, but I also know that the assessment center was introduced and withdrawn for some time, again withdrawn. So that is another matter altogether, because it's a subjective things. At times it doesn't work, but we have to pursue with one system for a certain period of time to get the benefit. Thank you. But last question to ma'am. This UCBs have played a major role in inclusive banking in urban areas, right? Because of its unique structure, unique positioning, strong local connect. So, with this increasing regulatory control, how do you see your HR strategy shifting?
Yes, sir. So as you know, UCBs mainly cater to individual customer needs and retailers or SMEs, because the motto of cooperative structure is service to society along with profits for business. Commercial and national banks are offered certain benefits in terms of relaxation concessions, which is presently disallowed to UCBs or allowed with certain restrictions. UCBs mainly bank on their personalized customer service, which is the USP of their business, and hence are preferred by even weaker sections of society. Increased regulatory control has necessitated the need for changes in the business strategies which impact the HR strategies, emphasizing more on compliance, vigilance, data analytics, information security, process audit, risk perspective, and leveraged use of technology. There is a need to retain traditional bankers with flavor for personalized service and counseling approach towards SME segment. New roles have emerged in order to support the critical profiles developed from regulatory point of view and attracting suitable manpower from the industry for manning such roles. Motivating them by offering best packages and emoluments and retaining them is a challenge for HR. Trained and experienced professionals with requisite experience and skill sets are scarce in the market and costly to acquire, especially in case of cooperative banks. Further, the staff trained by UCBs at lower level are ready material for poaching by the private players and increasing number of small finance banks, which is always a risk as there are increasing trends of poaching of UCB staff with experience in personalized service delivery as well as credit assessment for SME borrowers. Hence, attracting and retaining talent pool has obviously become a challenge. We at Saraswat Bank overcome this challenge through building a warm and supportive work culture, which allows employees to grow and offer them career progression, training and development, constant skill upgradation, timely reward and recognition policy, and continuous counseling at various levels to ensure a personal touch and bonding with our internal customers as well. This is my
Yeah,
response.
thank you. Thank you. I thank all the panel members. I think the discussion has been very enlightening. And going forward, actually, HR will have the onus of having a governance and outcome-centric HR,
Yes.
where you have the long-term talent development and succession planning activity. You have the business outcome-focused performance appraisal, so that you can not only retain, you can create the pipeline going down, and the centralized and tracking and monitoring system, as rightly said by Ms. Lakshmi. What State Bank has done, this CTA system or assessment system, perhaps that need to be emulated by other banks as well. Of course, HDFC will be a little ahead on that, because all the banks have their own pluses or minus, but the fact remains the HR is the fulcrum of development, and the HR has to align with the strategy for the growth. HR cannot be away from the growth and the goals. It has the onus of managing the culture of the organization, aligning the people with the mission and goal of the organization. Thank you all the panelists for this enlightening session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Das. Thank you to
Thank
the
you.
other
Thank you
panelists
for having
and
us.
everyone else. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to Preeti.
Thank you so much. Special thanks to all our panelists. It was indeed a thought-provoking and an enlightening session. We thank you for sparing your valuable time and making it possible to attend this panel discussion. Thank you so much. Now we'll move ahead with the prize distribution ceremony, wherein we'll be firstly we'll be calling on the winners of our macro research, and then we'll be having our examination prize winners. So to start with, I'll just like to share.
Yeah. Somebody come here. Yeah.
So we'll start with our prizes for the research category. Firstly, we'll be announcing the winners under the category of micro research. As it was rightly mentioned by my colleague, Dr. Kratika, that it's an essay competition, and which is organized by the institute, and we are very fortunate to have good participation from the banking fraternity as far as this micro research is concerned, and it gives me immense pleasure to announce the names of the winners. The first prize of rupees 15,000 goes to Mr. Ishan Katyal from Reserve Bank of India, and his topic was role of artificial intelligence and analytics in banking. I request Mr. Ishan Katyal to say a few words. Say a few words, please. Sir, you can unmute yourself, you can keep your video on, and you may please speak.
Yeah. Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm actually really thankful to IIBF for recognizing my paper, and it's a huge honor for me to receive this prize. Coincidentally, it happens to be my birthday today as well, and I'm very glad to deliver this speech on such an occasion. It's a great initiative which IIBF has taken, and it really gives us a platform to present what ideas we have as stakeholders of the banking industry. This micro research paper was a humble attempt at it,